Like a lot of jobs where workmen are involved, it often involves a good cup of tea and a natter. Often standing around more than we are working. Anyway, welcome to my latest video. I was given this shed a few weeks ago by a good friend of mine called Joe. I managed to get it to my house, and during its deconstruction and transportation I actually realised how heavy each individual panel of this shed is. It's made up of substantial framing and boards from a pallet, or many pallets. I'd hate to guess how much it actually weighs, but trust me, each panel weighs a ton. While I was transporting it, I started to think, how on earth am I going to rebuild this shed? I certainly can't do it by myself. And even with help, I struggled. Fortunately for myself, Adam, who you can see in the film, kindly offered to come and help me get a bit done. Initially I thought we'd maybe get the floor put down and levelled. It was, as I say, it's massively heavy, so I didn't really expect to get too much done. But as you can see, we're currently working on the third panel. What you was just seeing me do was grinding off the old screws and nails that had been hammered through. We figured it'd be easier to do that than try and get them all out. As we started to put this panel into place, Adam noticed that the boards on the outside overhanging the base were actually going to be too long. So quickly I grabbed my circular saw and trimmed a few inches off. The circular saw you see me using was kindly given to me by Evolution for free in exchange for a review, which I have done in a previous video if you wanted to look back. But again, this saw came in absolutely ideal because it has the capability to cut through nails and screws, and during this cut in particular I did it a few, so I was really pleased that the saw was able to do it. So lifting the panel back up to place, it was short enough, and I won't say it slid easily into place. It certainly didn't. It was still heavy, but we did manage to get it where we need it to be. I realise this video is quite long, and I could have maybe clipped a few more of the frames out, but I wanted just to leave it in and go with the flow. If you managed to work all the way through the video, well done. But I do understand this is one that is quite long. I know you can't see, but what we're actually doing here now is just getting a couple of fixings in place, and there was a bit of wood at the back there getting in the way, so I just thought it'd be easier just to take it off and patch it in again later. Of course it had to be awkward, so I ran into the shed, got out the trusty Evolution circular saw again and cut through the wood and the nails, got rid of it. I think part of the problem is when you get something like this that is second hand, as grateful as you are, it can take a bit of working out, knowing where everything goes, where everything fits, and getting it back in place. Especially considering the weight of this shed, it did make it quite a difficult job. Just there you'll see me using my grinder. I couldn't quite get in fully with the circular saw, so I just had to finish off a couple of screws with the grinder. Just putting a fixing in there to hold it in place. I think Adam's hands were starting to ache by now, and it just needed a little bit of support there. So finally, onto the front section of the shed where the door goes. During its deconstruction, I actually had to cut the front panel in half in order to get it out of Joe's garden. No big deal really, it goes back together easily enough. Plus it actually made it for easier moving. So again, as you can see, a lot of chatting, but I'm actually going around it and cutting off all the nails and screws that were sticking out. Again, just to make it a little bit easier, far easier than trying to pull them all out again. And there's another trait of the British builder, arse crack. At this point we were just trying to work out which way up it went. Took us long enough. Even though these panels were much smaller, less than half, they were still extremely heavy and difficult to move. As I mentioned earlier, the framework is constructed out of quite substantial pieces of timber, and it is overlaid with pallet slats. I'm not entirely sure of the dimensions. I think it's maybe 3x3 on the framing, and I don't know, possibly inch thick pallet slats. So there's quite a lot of timber there. The shed is about 7 foot by 5 foot, so that's quite a lot of pallet timber. So I'm just putting in the first fixing there for this section of the front shed. You can see at the top that I've put like a sash cramp just to pull it all together. Obviously the front of the shed at the moment isn't very supported, so just to use the sash cramp to pull it together to make it that bit easier to fix. Adam had actually noticed that the front panel that we're working on now was slightly too far back, so all we had to do was undo a couple of screws, move it a bit and put it back. A little more grinding nails and trimming panels before we put it in place. You know, it seems to be always when you're on the last bit, or more or less the last bit, that you start to get it right. You've spent the rest of the shed learning. This really was hard work. I know it looks like we're stood around doing nothing quite often, but really there were times when we just needed to stop. The weight of everything, it was so tiring. Sweat rolling off us, dripping off the end of my nose. You know, once in a while we just had to stop, catch our breath, and you know, just have a bit of a breather. So this is the last piece of wall panel going in. You can just about see where the doorway is. Like with the rest of the shed, a little bit of fiddling and fettling and poking around just to get it where we need it to be. It's at this point that we noticed there was a large gap between, well, where Adam's pointing now, basically. And we kind of thought that each end of the shed was sagging down, or, you know, the middle of the floor was raised up higher. Possibly we hadn't gotten it quite level. So what we're doing here is Adam's prying the shed up. Luckily he had enough strength left in him to do it, and you'll see shortly that I end up packing it up with another paver. However, this caused, you will see in time, this caused a further problem. It actually made the shed lean backwards considerably. So we're gradually working in one of the paving slabs into the far corner there. What we're hoping is that it lifts the two front corners up to close the gap above the doorway. We're looking at it, and it kind of did, but we weren't overly sure, so we decided again to do it on the near corner. We went with a second paving stone because this gap just wasn't closing up. But now, as you can see, the shed is leaning backwards considerably. I should have really moved the camera at this point, but I'll try and explain what I'm doing. Excuse me. I'm attaching a couple of blocks of wood to the inside of the shed, either side of the door frame, to put my bar clamp on. What I actually hope to do is use the bar clamp to squeeze this gap shut. I think you can just about see my hands in shot. What I'm doing there is actually tightening the bar clamp and, you know, slowly working that gap shut. I think what it ended up being is just that the lack of support at the front of the shed was making the front of the sides lean out a little bit. So in actual fact, the pavers that we put in were pointless, really. It does take a while, this little bit, but we actually got it there in the end, and we got the gap closed up. And what I've done is put excuse me, put an extra bit of wood across the gap and fixed it in good and strong. One thing I remembered is that once the roof goes on, the roof I will actually offer a lot of support to the top of the shed. So if I remember rightly, at this point I'd got the brace across the gap in the door just to hold it all in place for now. And we're just double checking that it's not going to fall apart. I think at this point, or somewhere near now, I take the clamp off and there you go, and it holds together. Now we're again looking at the fact that the shed is leaning too far back. So we decided to actually take the paving stones back out and hope that it held together. Which thankfully it did. So with all four sides in place, we decided to try and tackle the roof. I already knew that it'd be a hell of a struggle. It's the biggest piece out of the lot, and it is also covered with a thin metal sheet. As you'll see, we get it to the shed and we decided against it. The last thing I wanted was anybody to get hurt, so we kind of called it a day at this point. I just want to say a massive thanks to Adam for coming and helping me. I really didn't think we'd get this far. Not only that, there was absolutely no way I could have done that by myself. The shed weighs an absolute ton. Way too heavy for me to manage it myself safely. So massive thanks to Adam. I really appreciate you coming round. Also, I'd like to mention at this point that Adam has his own YouTube channel. He is a local lad to me. I think he's only got the one video at the moment. He's really enjoying doing some blacksmithing work, metal work, that kind of thing. I've seen his work on Instagram and on Facebook. It really is worth having a look at, so it'd mean a great deal to me if you wouldn't mind popping over and giving him a look. Maybe subscribe to him, show him a bit of support. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm hoping to get a little bit more help with the roof, and I will upload a quick part 2 as and when I can. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.